Good morning, designers. We're here today to talk about how to determine which is better, hourly versus flat rate billing. We haven't completely chosen a side yet, but maybe Sarah will help with that. Hi, Sarah. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do my little PowerPoint show that I do. And then we'll go through the pros and cons and walk you through what we think is best from what we've seen in our experience. Okay, hourly versus flat rate billing. Which one is better than the other? Let's review the flat rate pros and cons. Sarah, like I said, feel free to jump in on any of this. I'd love your opinion. Pros for flat rate. We like that there's the ability to budget your time and to just know what money's coming in so you can hire accordingly and kind of plan out their time. The client likes it because they generally know what they're paying for and they can estimate what a job is going to cost and they can factor that into their budgets as well. The value received is different when money is already paid out before the job. So we'll get into the philosophy and psychology of why we think that flat rate is a good idea sometimes because of the value perception. The other reason that it's really nice too to do flat rate is sometimes people just don't like receiving hourly bills after a job is complete. They tend to nitpick it, as everybody probably knows. So sometimes they appreciate what they pay for if they pay up front. They appreciate it a little more. Flat rate seems to be more profitable for commercial jobs. Not always the case with residential. So if you do a lot of commercial jobs, I think you'll definitely want to explore flat rate billing. But if you're working on a lot of residential jobs, I think that a little hybrid of flat rate and hourly could be good. And we'll get into that further too. The cons for flat rate, scope creep. Everybody knows what that is. If you haven't experienced it yet, you are the luckiest person that I know. But when you create a job and you say that it has a flat rate, and then all of a sudden all of these things come up, then as you know, it just gets to be too much and you end up almost coming out of pocket for a job sometimes because of scope creep. It's a terrible thing and it's something to really watch out for. Hourly seems to be a good tool for beginning designers because they may not be able to accurately estimate what a job is going to entail. I think seasoned designers have a little bit better of an understanding of how long jobs will take, and they're able to estimate that flat rate right off the bat a little bit easier. Long lead times, hangups to complete a project. You just have to, that kind of goes into scope creep too. You just have to be careful that projects aren't going on and on and on. Difficult clients disputing or nitpicking hours already worked. We kind of just talked about that and the value perception being billed after the fact. People tend to fight you on invoices more frequently when you're trying to back bill and front bill. So
I think that clients are just, typically clients, especially if you're just starting off, will always try. They'll always try to get you to do a flat rate. And that's because they feel like they'll be getting a better deal. And I think people tend to connotate billing hourly with lawyers, which is a negative connotation. However, I think it's important to, when you're starting off in this business, not to do flat rates if you can help it, because you're never going to ask for enough to cover the project, because when you're just starting off, you really don't know how much your time is worth or actually how much time you will be spending on a project. So it's important to kind of stress to your clients, you have to sell hourly in the beginning and you have to sell it as a deal for them. So we can get more into that later, but
you're saying in the beginning of the job, right?
In the beginning of a project and the beginning of a design career, like you're always, when you're trying to build your portfolio and you don't have you don't have a strong portfolio behind you, or maybe you're just starting off, in order to get jobs, people are going to be wanting a deal, and they're going to be wanting a flat rate because they're going to want to know how much they're going to spend on your services. And so it's kind of a catch-22 because they want to know how much the job is going to cost for your time. But at the same time, you don't know how much time you're going to be spending, or what the personality of the client is like if you're just starting off with them. So it gets difficult when you do
play a big role in whole, like how it's going to turn out. Is it going to be a worthwhile job or not? It really turns out the personality of the client has a lot to do with it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So sometimes you get lucky with a nice client who will allow you to bill extra at the end, but sometimes they'll just try and milk you for every minute.
It's always good to work for lawyers because they understand.
And then they fight you on their invoices.
Well, they expect transparency on their invoices, and they expect you to be organized. So that's another thing about hourly that's difficult.
Do you think that having a lot of detail in your time billing for lawyers is good?
Yes. Yes. Definitely. You can't just say, hey, here's a bill for 10 hours and have no detail on it for a client that's very detail oriented and that bills every 15 minutes like lawyers do. So you have to meet their expectations as far as hourly. Some clients don't care about details and other clients do. So you have to have the ability to provide either. When someone requests that, you need to have that ready. And if someone doesn't request it, then don't waste your time doing it. But we can talk more about that later.
Okay, so how to combat those cons? I think I really wanted to dive into scope creep. I think Sayre will agree with me on this too. The solution is a super defined contract. So I know Sayre's always been really good about this. She basically lists the entire job out in this very long contract. Any change orders should be accounted for, and just making sure you put those parameters on change orders to allow for so many, maybe even putting in like quantitative amounts, like you can only have this many or you can only do this. So a super defined contract, I think, is the key to avoiding scope creep. Restocking fees, or when people change their mind about items, like you should really have in your contract that you're going to charge restocking fees. And if you don't have a specific rate for restocking fees and you just allow them to maybe make, again, change orders once in a while, whatever your preference is, but just making sure that something is in your contract so that they know that they can't just get everything in their house, change their mind and say, well, you decided you were going to do my living room for me, but I don't like the way you did it, so you have to do it again until I'm happy. That happens a lot with people that don't have super defined contracts. You see that again and again. So just really having these very clear, concise contracts that outline exactly what you're going to do for the job, I think is key for for any flat rate billing. And then maybe even charging retainers with a disclaimer that if it exceeds the retainer, or your time exceeds the retainer, then you would need to bill additional. Or maybe you have a timeline that you have where it's like, okay, if the job goes past December of 2019, then we're going to go ahead and bill more. Or you start like a new flat rate or whatever the case may be, but just having timelines or retainers or things that will help you to make sure that these long lead times aren't going to drag you through the ringer with the job lasting forever and ever. I have some questions for Sayre that I feel like we've had discussions about in the past. So we kind of touched on how she feels about hourly versus flat rate. And from what I'm gathering, it sounds kind of like it's a little bit difficult to do hourly in the beginning of your career or at the beginning of a job. But then as you become a more seasoned designer, a bigger portfolio, better portfolio, you're able to maybe sell those flat rates a little bit easier. Feel free, Sayre, to go into more of that.
Yeah, so I think that with experience comes confidence. So as you have more projects in your portfolio and under your belt, you learn from your mistakes. So what we're trying to do now is to help provide some guidance in the beginning of a career, and then also provide some guidance and insight into what happens, when you're 10 years into your career. I had to kind of wing it on my own in the beginning. I didn't really have anyone telling me what to do. I just kind of used my instincts. And of course, I got burned at the beginning. I did flat rates, and I would basically be working for free near the end of the project. I had no way of understanding what was an appropriate amount of money to charge in the beginning. So, I would end up, if you broke it down to an hourly rate, I would end up working for like $10 an hour near the end because I was doing so much work and the retainer had run out. And I didn't really have any ground to stand on to say, hey, I need more money, because I had said I'll do the project for this amount of money with no understanding of how to set limits. So I think that that's inevitable to some extent, because anyone who's going to want to hire a designer with no experience in the beginning is doing that for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, they don't have a lot of money and they want a deal. Reason number two, maybe they like your creativity and like your personality and want to take a chance on you. But the first item always trumps the second. So in a sense, it's good to start off. It's unreasonable to think you're going to start off with an open-ended hourly when you're first starting your career. You have to understand that, you should ask for a retainer, do your best to calculate how many hours it's going to be, and understand that that you're building your portfolio and that it's not going to be profitable at first. Now, once you have 2-3 portfolio items, you can start asking for hourly because you have something to show for yourself. So I would always go to hourly as soon as possible. As you can always try for it in the beginning, but after you have a few projects under your belt, you're more likely to get that. So I think that it also comes full circle when you're 10 years into your career, hourly versus time billing or versus flat rates, because when you're further into your career, you're more comfortable asking for a much larger flat rate. And if you're comfortable asking for a much larger flat rate and maybe a 2-year contract on a project, then that's great because you're guaranteed that money. So you can hire people as needed. And you can really calculate enough so that any increased scope would be covered by this flat rate. That's what big designers like Michael Smith do. He asks for $1 million flat rate, and then he takes a percentage of the budget. And that way he can cover, 10 employees and any kind of overages that occur. But you have to be able to ask for enough to cover these overages, right? So that's where I mean when it comes full circle.
Yeah, and also I think you believe in, even if you're going to do hourly, like make sure to get money up front, because hourly can build up and accumulate really fast. So you could go through like a $10,000 job in a week, and so it's really important to get a retainer ahead of time, even if you're going to bill hourly, and just bill against the retainer. I mean, that's one feature that I love about Ivy, is that you can just put the retainers in, put your hourly in, and bill against the retainer, because I feel like you have to get something up front, so you're not
getting money up front is I would never suggest. So a flat rate is differently than an hourly billing with a retainer up front. Flat rate is when you say, yes, I will design X through Z or X and Z in your house, and it's going to take approximately 1 year, and my flat rate is $80,000 for the year, right? That's a flat fee. And then you break it down into several progress payments versus hourly, where you say, okay, your project's going to take around a year. I'm going to ask for a retainer for the first 100 hours of the project. So I'm going to ask for $30,000 for the first whatever amount of hours, and I'm going to bill against that. So that's an important thing to do with hourly, because you need money up front so that you're not working those 100 hours and your client, disappears and doesn't pay you for the time you've put in. Yeah. But if they disappear after they paid you the retainer, then whatever.
Yeah. And we've had a lot of situations where divorces happen, bankruptcies happen. Things just happen, even to people that you know and trust. So you don't want to work for free, and you don't want to ever come out of pocket for a product. But we'll go about that someday.
No. You never want to come out of pocket.
No, never want to come out of pocket. And people that you trust, I mean, sometimes life just happens to them too. So
that's correct.
It's important to be mindful of that.
Yeah, protect yourself.
So maybe, go ahead.
Marissa, I loved how you mentioned having a contract. I think a lot of new designers don't think about that.
Yeah.
We've had a couple new designers sign on recently that don't think that know they have to do it, but might need a little bit of help creating a contract. Who would you advise that they go through, or do we have a template, or how would?
Yeah, maybe we could come up with that. I don't think we have a template on hand, but that might be a good tool. And then maybe just having their own, because we're not attorneys. Just having attorneys, like a few minutes, just sign off on that. There's a really great place in LA called the Counselor for Creatives. It's a set of attorneys, and they can just review your contract for you, and I can send anybody that information if they want it. But yeah, we could draft something and have like a template for people if they ever want to request it, and then but I wouldn't make us the final, reviewer template. I think you should really, look at it yourselves, and then have an attorney sign off on it, and then just create it for every job. And then the other cool thing about Ivy that I really like too is that you can actually, whenever you request a retainer, you can add that contract document to that section in like the retainer.
As an attachment.
An attachment. Yeah. So that's a really cool thing that we try and do. We try and put those contracts in one place.
Riza also just chimed in saying that Ivy has a lot of great recs for an attorney.
Oh, in the Discovery Network, I assume.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'm crazy, but I remember once upon a time I think you mentioned that the FITM teachers were saying it's better to bill a flat rate, but you, again, have different ideas. You think it's better when you become more established to bill hourly. So
it was some accounting. It was like, they were trying to say that it was typically more profitable to bill a flat rate. Mm-hmm. I've had several different mentors that have disagreed with this, and ultimately I disagree with that somewhat. I think it's only more profitable and better to bill a flat rate when you're at a certain point in your career. So
you can bill giant flat rate.
Yeah, like if you can bill a $500,000 flat rate, then great. If that's enough to cover 3 employees in your job, and you feel that you can live off of that, then that's always better, because what that is a certain income, right? Whereas hourlies, you don't have any certainty. So I think what they were trying to say is the certainty of a flat rate is always nice. You know how much money you're getting, which is sometimes difficult billing hourly. Well, what's this month going to look like? What's that month going to look like? However, where it becomes difficult is when you have an increased scope of work, as Marissa was talking about, scope increase. And what's happening is you don't have the confidence, or maybe the contract, or to ask for more money when your scope of work increases. Or if you're in the middle of a project and your client's like, sorry, we don't have enough, we can't pay you more. Like, you said you do this job for X, and you're kind of arguing over details, like, well, you added this to my scope. And, it's in a creative field, like, it can be difficult sometimes to parse out tasks that are maybe related to a larger umbrella task that was in your contract, but you couldn't have foreseen this certain amount of work or details. Excuse me. So I think that a flat rate is nice, but hourly is safer as far as being able to control your client.
And I guess that's why we've seen, because with designers we have that do commercial jobs, we've seen it. I mean, they bill flat rates and they're super profitable, super successful, but because they're commercial jobs, they're billing such big, giant fees that I guess that's why that makes sense for.
Well, also commercial jobs have a fixed budget. right? They're like, okay, we have a $3 million budget to do this office build out, and we have set aside this much for design. So why would you bill hourly when you know exactly how much they have set aside? It's just, and they said, okay, we need to move in by this date. Now, when you're doing a home, a residence, oftentimes people can't give you a budget, or they refuse. They flat out just like don't know, they refuse, and you have to kind of wing it. There's also emotions involved. It's much more personal. Whereas when you do a commercial job, this is the people you're working for. It's also their job. So they come and go, right? They come in the morning and they leave at night. Whereas when you're working on a residence, I mean, it's a whole other level of psychological issues. So, and money is a very psychological, money is difficult. There's an emotion, right? So, so you have to understand the differences between the type of job you're working on and understand when it's appropriate to bill for hourly versus do flat rate. I know designer, we can get to the next question probably.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. That's your next question. You know a ton of designers. What do you see other designers doing that may or may not work? I think that you're all it's all kind of tied into what you're saying right now. So.
Yeah. So I know different designers that do things that I think are absolutely awful, and I would never do that, and that don't make any money. I know designers that are super top heavy with their firms where they have 10 employees and they're billing huge projects and they make no money because they're paying all of these creative employees, and maybe they're more focused on the creative than making money. I know I have another designer who is really comfortable. He was always comfortable billing flat rates, but he would ask for astronomical flat rates in the beginning of his career that I would never dream of asking for. Perhaps that's an issue between men and women. The guy, and he was just like, yeah, this is what I'm asking for. And I couldn't even believe it. And he would get it. I mean, he would get it. And that's
our next slide right there is like the value, the perception and value of perception. So what inspired me to do this webinar is just like this book I was reading by Ron Baker. Really good book. It's like, what's the title of it? It's at the end. Hang on, give me 1 second. What is it? It's Implementing Value Pricing. So he believes that that basically, value is in the eye of the beholder. And hang on, let me get my slideshow back up. I lost it. There we go. Okay. Value is in the eye of the beholder. Price is what you pay and value is what you get. You're not in business to make a profit. You're in business to render a service that is so good, people are willing to pay a profit in recognition of that and what you're doing for them. And one thing I think designers really need to remember is the whole world doesn't know what you know. So things that may be simple to a designer may not be simple to other people. Just remember, us accountants can't do what you guys do. I know Sarah knows this about me. Like, I have no spatial concept. I can't imagine what things are going to look like in a room. I have to actually physically put stuff in a room and place it around and then like rearrange it. I couldn't do renderings and like have this beautiful imagination of what things are going to look like. So I think designers just really need to remember that that what they do is really special, and it's a skill that not everybody has. And then sometimes it's just about the wrong client. So your friend who is billing astronomical amounts, he probably wouldn't take the wrong clients for him, or maybe he wouldn't even attract the wrong clients for him, or maybe they came along and he would just pass them up. So again, we're going to kind of dive deep into the whole psychology of it. Mark's law of value is the idea is effectively that value of traded products is the objectified expression of the current social value of the human labor implicated in producing them. So basically, Marx had a theory that labor itself has no value in bourgeois society. It only has a price. So if you're setting your prices to whatever you want, and that's the value of that you're selling to people, I think that designers maybe can sometimes remember that what they have is special. And lucky you guys are a part of a bourgeois society where people have money to spend. So again, just don't discredit your values and your abilities, because you have the ability to something that makes people feel a certain way. Like Sarah said, this is a very emotional, especially when you're doing residential, it can be very much of an emotional position that you're holding with this person. So you have the ability to evoke some sort of feeling from them, and I don't think that should be undersold. And again, you guys have a gift that not everybody has, especially us left brain folks here. Okay, I'm already beat that dead horse. So here is kind of the burning question. I'm sure, like, yeah, value is great, but what do I do when I'm first starting off? What do I charge? I think the industry standards we're in California. We live in a big city, so our pricing might be a little different than your pricing if you're in a smaller town, or if you're in maybe not such a big city. So here's some general amounts that we see people charging in Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York. Emily, where else do you think that these prices hold?
Yeah, I would definitely say our clients in New York, San Francisco, LA,
Boston.
Yeah, they charge a little bit more because the cost of living is more. So, and then when you get more into like the middle of America, designers might have to have a lower hourly rate. But
yeah,
then again,
Chicago designers were having a hard time billing some of these rates.
Yeah, even because the cost of living is a little bit lower in Chicago than New York, but it also but it also just depends on your experience and your clientele.
So a designer with little to no portfolio usually charges between 75 and 100 an hour. A designer with 1 to 2 years and a couple good jobs under their belt, 125 and between 125 and 175 per hour. A designer with 2 years in business and an established portfolio under their belt generally charges between 150, 250 an hour. And then Sarah's friend, Honey Badger, designer understands value pricing and charges based on the perceived worth associated with their time and their name. So that's what we were seeing in prices. We just wanted to share with you guys. It's a question that comes up all the time. Like, well, what do other designers charge, per hour? What's the general rate for what people are doing? So screen grab this if you want to, but also just really remembering that, like, you hold your pricing. You have an ability that is unlike anybody else's, and you should understand your own value and, price what you think you want your name to be worth. So if you can implement, go ahead.
I would also say working with your bookkeeper and maybe looking at your P&L and comparing where your income's coming from and seeing if your hourly design time is bringing in enough money. A lot of our designers will think, oh, I'm working really hard, but my P&L is showing that my net income is not that high. What can I do? And that's really when you want to look at your hourly. Are you billing all the hours that you're really contributing to that project? Is your hourly rate high enough? And so it's really nice to work with your bookkeeper and figure out, how can I make that net income a little bit higher by looking at your hourly rate and your time billing.
Yeah, and on your P&Ls, I know you break out the services separately, and then you also, I think is it the elite packages that you offer? Like in the executive summary, you do like a whole analysis of their P&L, so it's easy for them to kind of read that executive summary, look at their P&Ls, and decide what they where they could maybe do better, including in their gross profit margins. Again, we covered that on a different webinar, how to read your P&L like a boss. But yeah, I mean, you kind of break it down for the elite packages, I know. And then you should be able to kind of determine, you know, how much profit you're making on services alone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so how Ivy's time tracking will save you time when you're billing hourly. Sayre, how do you feel about the new Ivy time tracking?
It's great. It's much easier than doing it in Excel and then submitting an hourly. I really like the stopwatch tool.
Use it on your phone or on your computer?
I usually on my computer. But yeah, the phone is great as well. It's much easier, and I mean, I really can't say enough good things about it. I'm really glad I have it.
Some designers charge a flat rate. Emily, you did this slide. I'll let you kind of walk through this one if you want.
Okay, hourly billing. Yeah, so I know a lot of designers, new designers don't have a lot of extra help, so they really try to stay away from hourly billing because they think it's going to take more time to actually track their hours. So that's where Ivy will end up saving you a lot of time, because you can actually use the app or the computer to track your time. If you leave the office and you close your computer, it actually will start tracking automatically on your phone, I believe. So it will end up saving the designer a lot of time. They can track their time through Ivy. They can add to time billing invoices. They can add reimbursable expenses, which is kind of nice as well. Let's see.
And we've also done the merging component too. So if you have a client that you want to bill hourly, but you don't want them to see all the details, then we kind of just like merge it all. Like we pull in the hourly time that you've entered and then just merge it all into like one line item. And then you can just bill like that, because some people don't want the details for their clients to be able to pick it apart. So that's been a really nice feature on Ivy that we like too.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think that's it.
So thank you for joining us today. I think that's it. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
I don't.
Thank you, Sayre.
Thank you.
Chatting. I always love what you have to say. Logistics wouldn't be logistics without Sayre. Let's just say that. All right, cool. Well, have a good afternoon. And if you guys want any of our resources or templates or any links from this site, just email us and let us know. But thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. You have to end the webinar.
I am. I just